of iconic Village Apartments fire in San Marcos in 2018, losing two of his roommates and also his own life. Yet Zach Satterfield rose up from tragedy and turned his life into a mission to help.
We thank you for joining us right now. We do have some breaking news into the KSAT newsroom. Brad Simpson, the husband of missing mother of four, Suzanne Simpson from Olmos Park, has just been charged with murder. And this is significant because up until this point, he had been jailed since October 9th on charges of family violence and unlawful restraint. But he hadn't been charged directly with his wife's disappearance up until today. Now, joining us now is our colleague, Dylan Collier. He's just going to break this down for us. You were there earlier today as he was taken from the Bexar County Jail into to DPS. DPS took him there for questioning. What's happened since then?
Yeah, about 1:15 p.m. we saw a number of Olmos Park police vehicles, DPS trooper vehicle, as well as an unmarked vehicle from the sheriff's office line up on the east side of the jail. That's where they used to take suspects out of the jail if they were going to do a perp walk. We're talking several years ago before the South Tower opened up. They left about 1:15 p.m. with lights and sirens on, and then less than 2 hours later, so now a little after 3 p.m., that same convoy returned. We have since learned that Simpson was taken from the jail by law enforcement to a DPS office. He was questioned one last time in connection to the disappearance of his wife, Suzanne, and according to sources, regardless of what he said today, they already had a warrant signed for his arrest for murder, and that's them booking him on that charge about 3:08 p.m.
So we know throughout this entire case, it's been DPS, Olmos Park Police, and also the Bexar County Sheriff's Office that's been investigating this case. This is a search, folks. that has spanned beyond Bexar County. I mean, there was the search in Olmos Park near their home and also over in Bernie.
Bernie, it was one of the first searches outside of Olmos Park, was near that RV park in Bernie. We had 5 days, close to 5 days of searches at that landfill in southeast Bexar County. There's been some chatter among law enforcement that there's potentially a connection between Brad Simpson and the Bandera area. We know that his family has a ranch out there. That's been one of the common places that has kind of been talked about, maybe somewhere they should be looking for Suzanne's body. So, you know, a lot of different locations, a case that has evolved slow at times, and then today a lot of movement in this case. We have Simpson charged with murder. The other person charged in connection to this case, James Cotter, had his bond, his business associate, longtime friend, had his bond reduced significantly. We're told Cotter is now in the process of posting bond, getting fitted with a GPS monitor. He could be out of jail as early as this evening. So a case that we hadn't heard a lot about over the last 10 days all of a sudden has 2 major updates today.
And here's the other thing too, the M word legally is very significant because up until this day it had not been used in this case. Up until this point, Suzanne Clark Simpson had just been classified as missing. So when you have him now charged with murder, that's significant.
And they had kind of danced around that since the early days of this investigation. You had a family violence charge causing injuries, so police believed that he harmed her in some way on that Sunday night or Monday morning. You had tampering with records, tampering with evidence. You had his friend accused of concealing evidence. So they were sort of dancing around what unfortunately a lot of us believed was going to happen, and that is eventually they're going to charge Simpson with his wife's murder, and now we've reached that point.
Now here's the thing though, no body has been found. And that's also significant. So they do have a limited amount of time in this investigation to find her.
It's simple. You know, he goes to trial. His defense attorney asks them to present evidence that Suzanne Simpson is dead. If they're unable to do that, then he's able to get a dismissal. So in Texas especially, you sort of need a body to go to trial and get a conviction for murder. We were told this afternoon that the murder warrant was signed by a district court judge. She then sealed it for 30 days. So
that's unusual.
Yeah, very unusual at the state level, but it's done, and it says right there in the penal code that's done in order for investigators to continue doing the work, continue gathering evidence without fear of interruption, without fear of information going out publicly, and that investigation getting tainted. I can think just on one hand the number of times that I've seen a warrant, whether it's a search warrant or arrest warrant, sealed in connection to a state charge, and it's now happened twice in this case.
Okay, so Dylan, I want you to stay where you are and keep working your sources. I'm going to send things on over to our colleague JP, who is just outside of the Bexar County Jail. He's live there with an update right now. JP, what are you hearing there?
Well, obviously, you guys have talked about a lot of it, right? The biggest thing is that Brad Simpson is now facing a murder charge in this case, that he had long faced only assault, family violence, and unlawful restraint back when he was originally arrested on October 9th. We have heard that they took Brad Simpson from the jail for further questioning. So as Dylan mentioned, we saw that convoy of 2 Olmos Park police units, a DPS unit, and an unmarked unit leave here, sirens on, around that 1:15 hour. Around 3:08 is when we saw that entire convoy come back again. Sirens on, lights on. They pulled into this sally port right behind us. We didn't get to see him physically. Obviously, the police units had their windows tinted, so we are waiting for an update from agencies involved in this case at some point today. We had heard hopefully after 5, but not a specific time. So we were hoping to catch a glimpse of Brad. That didn't happen. We do assume we saw him leaving and then coming back in that convoy of units. The other thing, James Val Conner, longtime friend, business partner, a massive reduction in his bond. He was facing a bond amount totaling $1 million, $500,000 a piece for each charge. That is now $100,000 total, $50,000 a piece. He's facing charges of tampering with evidence with the intent to impair an investigation. Again, his bond reduction comes with conditions. Those are, he cannot have any contact with Brad Simpson, he cannot possess a firearm, and he must wear a GPS tracking device if he posts bond. So we are here awaiting the potential that he is doing that or is going through that process. The bond process can vary in length, so it could happen very soon. It could happen well into the evening hours, but we are here. He would be bonding out at this location just on the other side of this building. So we're kind of bouncing back and forth, waiting to see if we get a glimpse from either Brad, who we believe is already back taken inside, or even James Cotter, who is potentially bonding out at any moment this afternoon, today, or in the coming days. And so we're just kind of waiting to see right now. Obviously, this story continues to develop and lots of changes happening very quickly.
Well, John Paul, thank you for that, right? Because there are also a lot of questions about what the role of James Cotter is, being that he was someone who has been arrested in this case. His bond set as high as $1 million, and you just mentioned, JP, that that's been reduced to $100,000, so significantly less. His attorney up until this point had been arguing that that was excessive, and obviously that's changed. But we're not going to know until you're able to go and speak with officials there about what role possibly James Cotter had in this, or what he's told police, whether he's cooperating with them. At this point, we don't know. So, JP, thank you for that. We're going to go to a break right now, and then we'll see you on the other side of it. Thank you for staying with us. We continue now our breaking news coverage of Brad Simpson, the husband of the woman who you see behind me, a picture there of Suzanne Simpson, who's been missing since October 6th. He's just been charged with her murder. Our Dylan Collier is joining us here now because you just found out from your sources. They just announced what his bond amount is.
They've posted that his bond for the murder charge is $2 million. So that's on top of the other bond amounts that he's sort of staggered against him since he was taken into custody in early October. They then tacked on 2 charges when his friend and business associate James Cotter was charged. So the bond amounts are really stacking up. And you have to also remember he has a federal hold on him for a federal weapons charge. So it appears, as this case continues to develop and the Rangers try and gather more evidence, that it's becoming less and less likely that Simpson is going to leave jail anytime soon.
Okay, and for those people who are just joining us right now, the other part of this case is that we had mentioned that up until this point, Brad Simpson did have other charges against him, but not directly charged with his wife murder. And as of today, they are using the M word. They are saying murder, even though they haven't yet found a body. We
have got no indication that they have recovered her body. The murder warrant against Simpson is sealed. We're told it will stay sealed for the next 30 days. An unusual move at the state level, but we've got no indication that a body was recovered, and that's why the warrant was written. Instead, it was evidence that they were able to develop over the last few weeks, possibly from the returns from search warrants that led them to believe and develop enough evidence to charge him with murder, a first-degree felony.
And you just mentioned search warrant. They have searched through this couple's home
Right.
in Almost Park. They've searched through a wooded area. They've also searched through in Bernie, through a landfill there. That lasted about 5-6 days. Now we had someone writing to us on our website, and they wanted to know, because you had mentioned that Simpson's family has a ranch in Bandera,
Right.
and so there's some questions about whether that area has been searched. Will it be searched? And the person had been asking if they need a warrant, and yes, they do.
You have to have a search warrant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not public property. The property belongs to a family. They may be cooperating with the search, but in terms of seizing evidence and going in and potentially finding something that can be used in this case, you've got to get a warrant signed by a judge. And there's a process to that, and at some point you then have to turn in the results of what that search warrant turned up.
You just mentioned cooperation. Up until this point, what we know is that Brad Simpson has not been cooperating, something that even his own brother, Barton Simpson, says has not been happening. We don't know if that's changed today, but that is something that up until this point that we know of has remained unchanged. Now, I want to go back. We want to go to the timeline, because this is important to piece all of this together as we talk about this investigation. So we know that this started on the evening of October 6th. That is the day that Suzanne Simpson was last seen. Witnesses said they saw her and her husband at a private party at the Argyle. That's a dinner club over in Alamo Heights. Apparently, that couple was seen fighting at the party, returned to the Almost Park home later on that night. Now, when we looked through an affidavit, we saw that a neighbor of that couple saw and heard the Simpsons get into a fight sometime October 6th between 10 and 11 p.m. The same neighbor says they saw Suzanne and Brad walk away from their home, then heard screams. Then we know 3 days later, so we're talking about October 9th here, that's when Brad Simpson was arrested and charged with assault, family violence, and unlawful restraint over in Kendall County. And when we go back a little bit, October 7th, that was the day that Brad Simpson reported his wife missing. So now we're going to go to October 11th. Federal authorities placed a retainer of Brad Simpson to keep him in jail. That's something that usually happens when a federal agency wants to keep an inmate in custody. And then on October 15th, Brad Simpson was hit yet again with a new federal illegal gun charge. Investigators are saying that that barrel that you see right there on your screen, that rifle belonged to Brad, but it wasn't registered, and that's related to the federal hold that kept Brad Simpson in jail. So then you go to October 14th, investigators zeroed in on a Bexar County landfill. That's what we were talking about, right? When they were searching for Suzanne Simpson, they were hoping to find evidence that could lead them to finding Suzanne. There was hope that that would happen, but it didn't turn out. After days of searching, the multi-agency search, and we mean DPS, the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, Almost Park Police, we know that they finished their search on the 17th, did not find any evidence. A few days after that, October 21st, a business associate of Brad's, and that's the gentleman that Dylan just mentioned, James Val Cotter. He was arrested and charged with helping Brad Simpson hide a gun around the time that Suzanne was last seen. Now, James Cotter's formal charges say that he tampered with evidence in this case with the intent to impair an investigation, and up until now he had remained in jail on a $1 million bond. We mentioned this just a short time ago. That bond has been significantly reduced, Dylan, and so you could only, I mean, you could speculate and say maybe he is cooperating, maybe he's telling police something.
Potentially. I mean, there is a timeline there. Those bonds were reduced early this afternoon, kind of during the lunch hour, down to $100,000 total. So that's a 90% reduction in bond, and to a level where most people, because you don't pay the full bond amount, usually it's a percentage between 3 and 10%. So that's down to a level where a lot of people would be able to post that amount, put collateral up, and be able to get released. So you don't know if something, maybe an agreement was made, or if that's just the timing of the judge who heard testimony earlier this week and decided, okay, I'm going to go ahead and reduce his bond, because those amounts were very high for the charges he's facing.
Yes.
Those are bonds that you see. I've seen bonds for murder charges in Bexar County much lower than that. So these bond amounts seemed excessive. His attorney argued that they were excessive, and we saw today that the judge took action in that regard. And that's just one of those things where people in America are allowed to post bond, and it looks like Cotter will be able to do so.
Yeah, and there are rules.
Yeah.
He can't have contact with Simpson during the time that he's
full
he's
house
out on bond.
arrest.
Right.
GPS monitor on his ankle. Had to hand over his firearms, so he's free from jail, but has a lot of restrictions. He's also got to make all of his court appearances. If he were to not show up for one of those, a bench warrant would be issued for his arrest, and he'd be right back in jail. And then there's the potential that the judge could increase his bond again.
What are we going to be watching out for tonight? You have covered this case for the last month. Also, you've covered cases like this here in Texas for years. What can you expect to happen, just considering the pace?
Right.
When you're talking about the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, Almost Park Police, you have all these different agencies trying to investigate this.
Yeah.
What can we expect tonight in the next few hours?
I think more information on what pushed law enforcement over the edge to take this from a missing persons case where you have a husband and his associate with sort of these periphery charges. A couple of them are felonies. That's a serious situation, but none of them are near the level of a murder. What tipped them over the edge to push them and make them comfortable enough to charge Brad Simpson with murder, which is a charge that could put him in prison for the rest of his life.
Again, with no body.
With no body being found.
Right. So the other thing that we want to mention is that a lot of people have been tuning into this case because of the rarity of this. Also, it gets everyone's attention when you see a mother that's missing and you hear so much from the community.
Right.
But the thing is that, when you look at this case, you have to remember there are families, children involved.
Right.
Suzanne Simpson is a mother of 4. We know that yesterday one of her daughters put a statement out on social media. She called her mother a victim of domestic violence. And so we are keeping in mind that we also have to be sensitive that these are people from our community and that we understand the family is going through a lot of pain. And many of her friends were out very active searching for her for days.
Showed up at Cotter's bond hearing earlier this week.
Right. So
Yeah.
you have a lot of people in this community who are very invested in this case. And just to recap, before we let you go, we are letting you know that Brad Simpson, the husband of Suzanne Clark Simpson, the missing mother of 4 from Almost Park, was charged today with murder. We're going to keep examining and looking at this throughout the day. We know that he has been speaking to different investigators, DPS, Almost Park Police, BCSO. So right now what we're waiting for is to get more information as to what tipped authorities over to charge him with murder, because up until today, that word has not been used and that charge has not been issued.
And a lot can be said about the fact that the murder warrant is still sealed. That tells me that law enforcement has not finished the job, that they have some boxes to still check off when it comes to having a legitimate murder case that they believe can be handed to prosecutors and then filed against Simpson and then end up with a conviction. So to seal the murder warrant tells me that they haven't gotten there quite yet.
Right, and so they do have a little bit of time here to put these
30 days is
together.
state law. You can keep it sealed for 30 days and use that clause where you're hoping to keep the public from having this information and potentially messing up the investigation. So the clock is ticking on it. I mean, 30 days ago is when she disappeared, and we've already crossed that threshold. So, time moves fast in these circumstances.
Right. So what would need to change as far as this is concerned? Would they need to find a body? A witness needs to come forward. They need to get significant surveillance footage or a confession, or maybe the friend,
or something from maybe Simpson said he did it in text conversations. Maybe they have some kind of evidence of communication that he made after she disappeared that they believe is him talking about doing something to her, potentially hiding a body. There's got to be more than they had a fight, she disappeared, let's wait 30 days and then charge him with murder because he isn't cooperating. They must have something more than that at this point.
They need something a lot more tangible, and that's what we're going to be watching out for all day. We're going to see you here at 5 o'clock, at 5, 6, and 10. Please stay with us on air and online as we continue the investigation into the murder case of now Suzanne Clark Simpson. Thank you.